So we're going to shift the focus to the group approach for a while now. So one of the things is just refocusing our thinking from individual to a group orientation. So in Western cultures, we mostly think of ourselves as individuals. We think about our personal characteristics. Here's what I do for a living. Here's my hobbies. Here's my interests. We're often taught from early on to own our own failures, and hopefully also taught to own our own successes. But it's often really an individual focus. Even our names. I relate more to Chris, which is my first name, than to Wagner, which is my last name. When I think of myself, I tend to think of myself as an individual before I think of myself as a member of the family that I come from. But we're all members of groups. And so we're all influenced by the group norms and dynamics that we run into, whether our family group norms that we grew up in or our current family that we may have in our life. Those norms affect how we are. The work that we do, there may be particular things that are okay and not okay, certain dynamics. All those shape how we act in any given moment, and they may pull us to be more open, be more friendly, or they may be more, may make us be more shy, or maybe more withholding if we don't feel safe. And so when we're thinking about group work, we want to keep our mind on that larger sense of what's the atmosphere, what are the dynamics, and not get caught up in kind of individual work back and forth with people, with witnesses. Okay, so motivational interviewing groups. We started developing these about 25 years ago, specifically to address addiction issues. Over time, as we were working, we discovered that rather than just talking about somebody's drug and alcohol use or other kind of addictive problems they had, working with people with gambling, etc., it was helpful to focus on their stressors, successes, values, strengths, and motivational interviewing, thinking about that then really helped inform the group work that we were doing, and we began to develop to think specifically how could we integrate motivational interviewing with the addiction group treatment that we were doing. And we came to this perspective that groups seem to actually provide some benefits that working with people one-on-one wasn't getting us to. But the key is that groups take strong group facilitation skills, as many of you know. It's key to make them therapeutic and not boring. It's key to make this a group experience, again, not individual discussions with witnesses. So as we developed this MI groups model, we tried to pull together pieces from the individual Miller and Rolnick MI one-on-one model of motivational interviewing. And later on, we were really impressed with Barbara Frederickson's broaden and build model, which I'll talk just in a minute about, of positive emotions and how that could inform us how we work in groups. And then the American Group Psychotherapy Association came up with an empirically based best practices guidelines, and we try to incorporate those into the model that we've continued to develop since that time. So I want to talk about Frederickson's broaden and build model, but to do that, I need to first start with this kind of contrast of what was called classic emotions theory. So psychology for many years focused on emotions, and yet really only focused on negative emotions, right? So in looking at what is the role of emotions in human life, the negative emotions tend to do this. They increase our sense of tension. They motivate us by kind of making us unhappy and then needing to resolve that. They also tend to narrow our cognitive focus. If a bus is coming at you in the street, probably not a good time to be looking at your cell phone or kind of looking around and admiring the beauty of the sky, right? That when there's a threat, negative emotions influence us to really focus in on one specific thing. This serves then to protect us from danger, from current or near term danger or risk, and it tends to prime us for action. So you know about the whole fight or flight kind of way of thinking about things. So anger influences to attack, fear, we escape. When sadness comes on, we wall off and protect ourselves. Disgust is another negative emotion. This makes us want to push away, kind of get away from things. But we also become aware over time that as the negative emotions come too high, get too high, people can freeze up, the kind of deer in the headlights reaction. Now, when people are seeking help in counseling, therapy, or even support groups, they're often feeling stuck and often demoralized. I just don't know that don't feel so good about myself, and I don't know that I can do anything differently. Typically, their focus is on distress. And so typically helping has gone to, let's look at that distress or the problems and let's try to solve them and fix them for you. People doing therapy or counseling often look for what happened in your past that kind of brought you to this current state. So what Barbara Frederickson, who's at University of North Carolina, did was started studying positive emotions and really looking at the evolutionary effects of it and the physical effects of positive emotions, which had been largely ignored by psychology research. And some of those joy, curiosity, interest, hope, love, gratitude. And through research and theoretical development, has really come to a point of looking at what positive emotions could do is reduce that tension. So if somebody has a really heightened state of adrenaline, positive emotions can help them get calm or relaxed. And as they do that, it allows the ability for somebody to broaden their cognitive focus, to kind of imagine things that aren't right now here in front of us, to brainstorm, to be creative. And it helps people build resources for the future. So some of the examples here you see the experience of the emotion of joy encourages somebody to play, which builds motivation. Curiosity encourages us to explore, at which point we'll take in new ideas and the way we think about things can become more complex or more realistic. Gratitude can help us relax and build resilience and sense of appreciation and connection with other people. And elevation is a little more complicated one, but it's a sense of I'm rising up, that I'm kind of moving above where I've been before. And that often can seek us to, or encourage us to seek out new opportunities, new ways to be inspired or be creative and develop new things for ourselves. And the way Frederickson talks about this is this sense of an upward spiral, that by starting with a positive perspective, then comes positive emotions. And from that, people find positive meaning and kind of expanded ways of thinking. And in that state, they want to connect with other people, share, learn, be together, and that this will often help people to have greater persistence in the change they're making, greater sense of resilience to setbacks, and greater positivity about the whole process. And we just thought this is a beautiful model for group work. And so we pulled that together with the MI ideas, as well as the recommendations from the empirical summaries of work. And we came up with these kind of key elements of motivational groups. So we have the client-centered style where we frame things within the client's perspective, focus on empathy, supporting somebody's autonomy, helping them find empowerment, use their strengths, and kind of deepen the focus into not just the current struggle, but what's underneath that, as well as broaden their perspective. We will use group processes, getting people engaged, linking people together, encouraging openness in the group, a positive climate, and creating cohesion. And then the idea of altruistic acts of supporting each other. And we combine those with the MI change focus, the kind of looking forward, building momentum towards the future, evoking the group members' ideas about change, getting people to be creative and involved, and also focus on building hope and figuring out a way to make forward progress. Some of the challenges with this are the group dynamics, that we have to manage speaking terms, right? So we have to make sure everybody participates, and that can often be a challenge. It's not that everybody has to have equal time in every group session that we might have, but that everybody needs to be involved and at some point have the opportunity to share something and relate to one another. Another challenge is managing different styles and beliefs. We certainly get this in addiction treatment and recovery work. People have very different beliefs sometimes about what that means, how that should be. And in an approach where we're supporting people's autonomy, we want to support that. And yet it means not, kind of being there to correct if somebody's trying to impose their own belief on somebody else in the group. The same thing with managing different styles. Some people, some people are storytellers, some people like fun, like humor, other people are serious or kind of like to be problem solvers. And it's a matter of trying to bring everybody together in a group while still allowing people to have the style that they're most comfortable with. Another challenge with group dynamics is working with the writing reflexes. So I talked about our writing reflexes as helpers, as facilitators, where we want to kind of step in and fix something that makes us concerned or influence somebody to think in a certain way. And in groups, we're having that happen with everybody involved, right? Everybody kind of has a button that can get pushed or an idea that they think others should follow. And that's a challenge, is to keep a positive group dynamic with those elements in place. In terms of the focus of change, or the clinical focus is listed here, one of the challenges that people often have multiple or different areas of focus, different change targets, different goals that they might want to make. So even if I'm working with addiction, or even when I'm working with people who are there with opiate addiction specifically, we may, everyone may share that pattern or that behavior or that habit, but the way it sits in their lives is often very different across people. And so the things that people need to change in order to make that kind of change in their life are different. Sometimes it's becoming more assertive. Sometimes it's managing anger. Sometimes it's, finding a way to be more content or more fulfilled without being intoxicated. So the thing is, even if we have a theme, the individual focus are often different across people, and it's a challenge to then make it an experience where everyone feels like they're coming together. And in a group, of course, we just have less time for each person to kind of share their thing. So as we focus on how do we blend our group facilitation with counseling, so one of the first things that I've found helpful is to shift my focus from thinking about counseling, thinking about working with individuals, to think about the main task that I'm doing is facilitating a group interaction, right? That what I want to do is foster group energy for change. That I want to get a group where people come in there and it feels kind of exciting to them, or it feels elevating or energizing. And so I need to keep my focus there. Another thing that's a challenge, or another way of blending, is to go across the different clinical issues people have, the different things that people are struggling with. So even in a SMART group where people are focused on recovery, some people may be struggling with depression, other people with social anxiety, other people with, self-esteem issues. And what I need to do is bridge across all those different things by not focusing so much on the individual details for each person, but what are the general challenges or experiences that brings to people? What challenge do all of these situations pose for us? And the challenges are often like, I don't want to shrink back. I don't want to kind of cave into myself. I don't want to give up. I want to believe it's possible. So if we can get that kind of conversation going, people often come together. What characteristics or values can you use to make a positive change is another way that we don't get distracted by the different elements between people, but it brings people together in a common effort. I talked about change talk. Change talk is when somebody's talking positively about an individual change. In groups, if we're facilitating them well, we can promote internal change talk through linking people together by finding similarities in stories that aren't necessarily the situational similarities, but the things where that took determination, or from that you learned resilience. And that often, if I'm linking in that way, someone will come back 10 minutes later who hasn't said anything and said, inside myself, here's kind of a new realization I came to. And so this is what I really want to promote in a group, is not just the taking turns speaking, but having everybody go on each other's ride with them, so that internally we're open and thinking about our own change even as someone else is speaking. The last bit about facilitating is this balance for me, is focusing and staying open. I don't want it just to be a meandering conversation that goes anywhere, and yet I don't want to be so focused that I miss an opportunity for a really new development coming up, or somebody who kind of has an epiphany or suddenly is willing to be open with others in a way that they hadn't been. So I can use lots of group strategies to do that. We don't have time to talk about those different things right now, but there's various ways to kind of mix and match the experience that I know you use, exercises, tools, written exercises, breaking into dyad sometimes, going around person by person. A couple of the things that I need to manage also with groups then are thinking about the level of uniformity versus diversity in a group. So homogeneous groups where everyone seems very similar, often will get cohesive fairly quickly, and are able to focus quicker and work on similar goals. The heterogeneous groups, where people seem really different from different backgrounds or have different perspectives or different experiences, different focuses, they'll often require more focus on getting people engaged and finding those connections between people. And yet my experience has been the wider the range of diversity we have in the room, ultimately kind of the deeper we can go in connecting, and the broader we can be in goal setting. It could go from very kind of discrete behavior changes to large changes in how I feel about myself and how I see my life and how I'm living my life. Ultimately, I think this is something where every group that seems alike, I might be looking for differences so we don't get into groupthink. And every group that seems initially kind of really different from each other, I'm looking for similarities, ways to pull us all together. The way session structure fits into that, I know you have different kinds of structures in different SMART groups. So very structured sessions can often be very predictable. People can know what to expect. And so if people are socially anxious, that can be good for them. The flip side is that at times the structured approaches can feel kind of boring, right? So people know what's coming so they don't stay engaged the whole time. All the way to the other side, the unstructured approaches tend to, they're unplanned or unfolding, kind of whatever happens in the moment is spontaneous, and it's exciting, and it can be inspiring for people. But at the same time, with no structure, some people can feel very unsettled by that. I'm not sure what's coming. I'm not sure, particularly people, if you have traumatic experiences, or if you're not feeling well about yourself, that can keep people a little bit on guard. The semi-structured approach, the kind of in the middle, where there's a general topic we're going to focus, or maybe there's a tool we're going to look at, it can often kind of bridge the difference between the two and help people both keep focused, but also be open to new developments. Okay, so when I'm doing motivational interviewing groups, sometimes I'll do one-offs, but often it's spread out over time, and it's kind of phases that are building forward, similar to the processes of motivational interviewing, engaging, exploring perspectives, then kind of broadening perspectives and building momentum towards the future, and then moving into action. And I just want to give a little bit of information for that, and then hopefully we'll still have some time for some questions if you're interested. So I don't need to get into details here, but the idea is this is kind of like an accordion. I could do different things in a single interaction with people, or over time I can spread out, and these could each potentially be different sessions, right? One session just focused on values, or one session just focused on past successes. So kind of walk you through the first phase is engaging the group, getting a positive environment, climate, what we call decontaminating the referral process. So often the experiences somebody has had to get to the point where they're in this room with us or in the Zoom room with us, has been a troubling one from them, and they may bring forward those emotions, negative emotions they may have, or the sense of feeling pressured or feeling resistant into the group. And so there's some element of kind of trying to disconnect the experience in this group from the process that got somebody there if it was a negative one. Developing group norms and guidelines is something in MI we try to do collaborative rather than having a list of rules. Here's how to behave. Often it'll be, let's talk together about how do we want to be with each other, what's okay, what's not okay. So again, just keeping it collaborative. In terms of our own style, it's a matter of modeling non-judgmental warmth, being friendly, being open and genuine, being willing to acknowledge when I don't understand something or when I've made a mistake, when I've gotten too carried away, being willing to laugh at myself when I struggle. And then, of course, the important thing is accepting negative feedback. If somebody doesn't like something about me or my style, to be really open to that, because it may be an important thing for the person to express. And sometimes it's me, but also sometimes people come back later and say, you remind me of my brother, or something like that. You reminded me of my father. And so I was struggling with you in that moment. But the point is to never, again, because of the positive regard and acceptance, never to get defensive, which is often a challenge to do because I have my own buttons that can get pushed. So, but to keep that kind of modeling of the spirit. Insert the focus then early on with people is creating a positive group climate, an atmosphere, an environment that feels like people can thrive and flourish in it, rather than, as you see at the bottom left there, kind of wither and die. Right? So the overall atmosphere is often established at the first contact of an ongoing group or in single sessions within the first couple minutes. And people's brains will tell them, this feels like a safe environment, this feels like a place that I want to open up in, or it doesn't. And if we don't tend to that at the beginning, sometimes we can end up with an environment or a climate that doesn't feel very welcoming or accepting to people, and then it gets harder and harder moving forward. So one of the outcomes from group research was discovering that people who focus too much on tasks rather than the relationships in the group, those groups tend to have less positive outcomes than when group facilitators keep their focus on having an engaging, positive climate and atmosphere and building relationships with people. You see there at the bottom some of the results from research. When there's a positive climate, people care more about each other. People try harder to both understand themselves and others. They share more, they open up more, and they get that sense that this group is really worth participating in. This is worth investing not just my time, but my emotional energy and my willingness to be open and vulnerable. So I just got a note from David that we'll take questions this afternoon at 3, so that takes the pressure off a little bit here. So the second phase in MI groups is exploring people's perspectives. So some of the activities we might do are exploring I know you're probably getting distracted by the Halloween group at the bottom if you haven't seen that one before. Exploring people's different focus in the group, how their behavior change that they want to make or the issue of addiction fits into their life, right? How does this fit into your daily life? What's your lifestyle like? Some people are evening drinkers, some people are weekend drinkers, some people drink all the time or use. Some people, have a pattern where they'll work very hard in the daytime and then blow it out at night. Other people do a little something to kind of help them get through the day. And just we're not trying to solve anything here, but just to kind of understand how does the change you want to make, where's the current pattern fit in your life? How's that kind of fit for you? We might explore people's ambivalence. We might take even a whole session looking back. Tell me kind of how things got to this point. What were things like before? And we may find some similarities and differences there. Some people who previously, kind of felt good about their life and things have kind of spiraled downward. And some other people have kind of always struggled. And this is their first chance to kind of pull things together for themselves. We can use a heuristic model, so whether it's stages of change or the ready, willing, able kind of thing, just use some model or the tools that you have in SMART to have people to consider, how does this fit for you, and what do you want to talk about? So again, the goal here is to not move forward too quickly, but to explore different people's perspectives on things and really set up a group environment where there is support for autonomy, for people to see and do things that fit for them, whether they fit for other people. In groups, I'll just take a second on this one. When we look at subgrouping, it can get complicated real quickly. As soon as you have 3 people in the group, you have the potential for 7 different subgroups or relationships of individuals on their own, individuals connecting to one other person, or the whole group. When you get over 5 people, the increase is exponential. You have 100 different ways people can connect or disconnect from each other. And the reason that's important to recognize is that groups can get complicated if people aren't cohesive. So cohesion is about coming together as one group. And if that isn't happening, it can really get to be challenging to facilitate a group. And I imagine most of us have been in groups where there's in-group conflict and recognize how difficult that can be. So just to talk about cohesion then, this idea of bringing people together. The cohesion is probably the most important part in predicting the effectiveness of group encounters. The sense of we're in it together, we're a group, that people have my back, that I'm not alone in this. Now, early on, there tends to be kind of a surface cohesion that develops that is kind of superficial, and I don't mean anything negative about that, but we attach in ways about, kind of similarities in stories or similarities in backgrounds. There's casual sense of we're kind of here together. Ultimately, though, what we want, if you have a chance to have a group that's working together over time, is this sense of deep cohesion to develop, some sense of true intimacy, where people can have really different opinions. Sometimes conflicts can come up because we have human emotions and we get defensive sometimes, and sometimes we get kind of stuck in our own ways. And we need a group where that can be okay and that doesn't destroy the group. When we get to this deep cohesion, people can really be themselves, including their not best self, and still not feel threatened to be rejected by the group. And that's often what the most healing aspect of group encounters is. So the things that promote group cohesion, you'll see on the leader list, it's very much the things I put on the model before. Sharing, encouraging sharing, being open, being warm, acknowledging mistakes. But there's also an element in which, as group facilitators, we do need to manage some of the problems that come up, some of the challenges. If somebody's judgmental or prejudicial in a group or says something that might hurt somebody, we do have that element. But what we can encourage members to do that promotes cohesion are very similar things to what we're doing, and it's why we're modeling it, right? To be self-disclosing, to be open, to be able to laugh at ourselves, to be supportive and pay attention to other people, to be on time, to really be fully in tuned. And if we can get an environment like this, cohesion will develop out of that. A tool that we have to get at that point, which I've referred to a couple times, is linking. So it's finding ways to make connections between people. What you see in this series of slides, first of all, is that this might be around, so early on in a group, it may be that the facilitator is really talking to individuals, and you're kind of having back and forth conversations, and other people are listening and taking it in, but there may be less of people talking to each other, less of what they call in 12 steps crosstalk. As we move forward, we may continue to have talk with individuals, but they start to talk to each other. Sometimes the conversation is just one way, and our goal as facilitator, or our task as facilitators, look for that person who isn't really connected with other people, make sure we maintain an active connection with them. Linking then is when we listen to 2 different people and we reflect on some way that they seem to have a connection or a similarity in terms of their experience, their perspective, their change processes, their sense of determination, their sense of vulnerability. And by doing that, we draw a connection between people just by implication, that starts to help people connect. And we do that around the group, and we keep finding ways that to link people together. And what happens then is at some point the group really starts to congeal, and they start talking to each other, and now we can make our reflections off into the full group. As a group, it seems today like we're feeling this, or here we are. And of course, paying attention to the person who might be silent. It's okay that they're silent. It doesn't mean they're not connected, but we want to keep noticing them and not lose focus on them with the people who are more talkative. Finally, ultimately, when people are all talking with each other, we can kind of be in the background and just focus on more advanced leadership skills and not necessarily be focused on the moment by moment interactions. So a thing that can threaten that are people having challenging interpersonal styles. So somebody might be domineering or a storyteller or intrusive. Somebody else might be socially anxious and avoidant. And this can influence how the group feels when people are coming together. And so in motivational interviewing groups, we want to recognize it's very difficult for people to change their style. Somebody who's a real talkative storyteller is going to find it hard to be quiet. Somebody who kind of likes to sit in their corner is going to find it hard to come out. And so what we want to do is, rather than try to influence them to change their style, is to find the strengths in that style and kind of bring them forward, right? And bring them forward in a way that, allows them to fit in the group better. Just one second. So for example, if somebody's domineering and kind of takes over a lot, we could be annoyed by that because it can kind of get in the way. But the flip side of that is we can try to look for what are the strengths in that style and really try to notice those and affirm those. So people who are domineering tend to be ambitious, determined, decisive, assertive, and we can affirm that and yet try to reflect on that style in a way that helps the person fit into the group rather than stand in contrast with the group. So maybe encourage them to share their own stories, notice their intentions to be helpful maybe when they get dominating, but also encourage them to invite other people to share reactions to their stories so that they start to learn it's not just about telling my story, but it's about, are other people with me and what are people hearing from what I'm saying? A similar thing, if somebody's avoidant, we can emphasize the strengths in that. You're really good at standing on your own. You're a person who doesn't want to intrude on other people's time or space, and you can be sparing in your interactions with people. And we can kind of adjust for that by, if somebody's socially anxious, for example, don't lead them to go last in a conversation, because often if somebody's socially anxious, then they're not hearing what's going on. They're kind of in their head being nervous. So maybe don't make them go first, but allow them to go second or something. Encourage them to kind of get it out there and participate and get past that. The overall goal is whatever style somebody has is to find the strengths in that and kind of harness it so that the group comes together and everybody fits together even with our differences. When conflict does come up in groups, I have kind of a stepped system that, depending on how severe the conflict is, I can sometimes I always want to try to maintain a supportive style, but I can absorb the content and just kind of redirect the conversation if I think it was a small one that we don't really need to focus on. If somebody has given advice in a way, for example, that I think feels like it's a pressure on the person, I can restate that in a more consistent manner. So when somebody says you should do this, I can ask the person, what do you think about that idea? What might you want to do with that idea? If somebody says alcoholics can't do this or that, then I may turn to the person they're talking to and emphasize their choice in that. What do you see as possible for you, and what are limits for you? And it's just trying to ease up without directly pushing back on the person who says it, try to ease the environment a little bit. If it's more intense, then I can focus on the person who makes the negative comment or the interfering comment and explore what are they intending to do. And I might seed a bit of positive intent, maybe include some process feedback. So, David, I noticed that you seem really worried about Gretchen. And in that moment, that worry kind of got you to the point where you felt like she needed to wake up. And so you said this. I'm not really sure it's coming across that way to her. And so, I wonder if, you might rephrase that a little bit or just explain. And so often if you explore with a person like that, they'll say, yeah, I just got nervous. I pushed my own button and I want to be helpful. If they persist, then what I can do is then go to the person who's being spoken to, or if I feel like they're being stigmatized too much, go to the whole group and say, well, how do David's comments seem to sit with people? Like, what's your reaction as you hear them? And we can explore some of that and hopefully reduce the conflict and find a way to come together again. Now we're going to wrap up here in just a minute, but let me just give you the kind of the big picture of building momentum towards change. This is the focus of what we're doing. And I know you use many of these kind of areas of focus in SMART groups. I heard several of them talked about this morning, so we don't need to spend time on them, but looking at people's past successes and what lessons they've learned about themselves that they can take forward, exploring their values, what's important to you as a person, how does that help you through hard times, how getting up tomorrow can you make sure you lead with your values, that the things that are really important to you is what's guiding how you react to the world tomorrow. So it's kind of bringing those forward, envisioning a better future, so imagining a possibility in the future. Now talk to me from then. Tell me how you're feeling about yourself, what you're thinking, how that fits for you, who's in your life. And getting people to talk like that it's hard to imagine a future that's better because it's very abstract, but instead it kind of makes it more real and allows the motivation of kind of the future to pull that person forward. And so that's another area of focus we can have. And then strengths, helping somebody explore what they're good at. And then how can you get up tomorrow and take those strengths and really let them lead your day? Use those to kind of move forward towards the goal that you have. We can explore importance and confidence. So what's the sense of what's important to you, and how could you be more confident, and explore those as topics. Ultimately, I'm going to skip over that. What we're getting to is change planning in this sense of trying to bring all these pieces together and make sure somebody is clear on what's their vision, why they're doing it, what they think they can bring, skills they can bring to that to make it better, and then what they can do ultimately to kind of move things forward for themselves. I just want to come back. I appreciate your attention as we work through this, and our glitches early on, I'm hoping that we got those cleared up. But we will have some time at 3 o'clock to take questions. If you have any questions about this or comments or reflections on it, I'm sure that many of you have noticed as you've been listening that a lot of these things align with what you do and kind of how you see things, and that's great. I think one thing that I like to pay attention to is not just what is added to my practice, but kind of what do I take out? And from MI, what it's really taught me to take out is pushing my ideas on other people. And I don't mean that in an aggressive way, just kind of getting caught up in my head about sharing with people what I think is important for them, and instead putting my attention on them and helping them think through what's important for them, and really keeping my attention so that in any given moment, I can adjust to where they are. So thank you for your time, and I'll see you all later today.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. This entire conference will be available on the Smart Recovery YouTube channel, so people will be able to watch this many more times. In about 15 minutes, after some words from our gold level sponsors, our national president, Bill Greer, will join us at 12:15 Eastern, 9:15 Pacific. Our next panel will be at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific. Dr. Carrie Wilkins from Center for Motivation and Change at 1:30 Eastern. And then Chris and Carrie will take any questions from you all from 3 to 3:30 Eastern. Clinicians will get a link during that half hour to a survey that they will need to complete to get their CEU certificates. Thanks, Chris. See you in 3 hours. You can log back on then. Great.